year across wide areas in Africa. That's the goal of field workers from the Carter Center, working with a coalition of governments and international agencies.
And obviously, when you don't have guinea worm, then the children can go to school, the farmers can plant their crops, and the entire economic status of a village and a community and a nation can be helped.
Their strategy includes public education to prevent contamination, supplying millions of water filters, applying safe chemical treatment to water sources, and providing safe water from underground wells.
We hope and expect that within a year or two there will be no more guinea worm anywhere.
If they succeed, within the next few years, guinea worm could become the second human disease in history, after smallpox, to be eradicated from the earth.
Alrighty, so there you go. Now, we're going to have a quiz. Did everybody get their little piece of paper? So this quiz covers everything that we had prepared slides of that we haven't had quizzes on. So we haven't had a quiz on cyanobacteria or fungi or any of the protista. This covers all of those. There are images in your lab manual.
Yeah, can I start off?
Yeah, I have to finish this quiz.
One moment.
Can I just
You
give
know
them
that.
the first question? On it?
Sure.
Okay.
That's what I said. Please keep going.
Okay, here's my thought. Question number 1. What's the phylum?
Can I tell them? Can you please?
Please.
So this is the one with that.
Is it marked? Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay, you good?
Yeah.
This one was in the back, and this one was the stuff I was going to do before today, which is seven. Just short. So if you want, you can keep it here. Okay, more. Good job. Thank you guys for that. I'm better to get one from water.
I'll just put it somewhere.
It's very useful when you're doing that. It's a very nice way.
They don't have these in here anymore. Or at least they can't find them.
Oh, what they should.
Okay, are we ready for question 2? Maybe? So, question 2, organisms shown here belong to the domain Eukarya and to the kingdom what? And what we said about this is, if it looks like a this and it behaves like a this, we're going to call it this. And then I told you guys a joke about it. It was pretty lame. Now we're getting into more detail. So this organism, this is 2 different images, one showing sexual reproductive structures and the other showing asexual reproductive structures. What's the phylum? Remember, the phylum name is based on the type of sexual spore produced. What is that? Seriously?
Probably stuff you don't want to have.
for my quiz. Question number 4. The organisms shown here belong to what genus? Again, the A and the B has to do with A is sexual reproductive structures, B is asexual reproductive structures. It's the same genus. And those images are on the same slide, they're just on slightly different areas of the slide. Question number 5. Name the type of fungus, again the genus name, for the fungus that is producing sexual basidiospores. So both of those images were sections taken from fleshy fungi, and the slides that show the fleshy fungi, there are no asexual spores. There's only sexual spores. Question 6. These organisms belong to what kingdom? Domain is Eukarya. What's the kingdom? Question 7, what is the phylum name for the organisms in figure A? The phyla in this particular group of organisms all end the same. Question 8, which of these organisms belongs to the genus Spirogyra? So this one is a multiple choice type question. The answer is either A, B, or C. Which one is genus Spirogyra? Nine says these organisms have either skeletons or cell walls that are made of some particular material. You can tell by looking at the image on the left, and if you remember what I said about what that material was, those skeletons are made out of. The skeletons on the left, walls on the right, but what material are they made out of? question 10, what is the phylum name of the organisms in figure B? Phylum. There are 3 different phyla represented there. What's the phylum of the organisms that are shown in B? Which in this case is very similar to the genus name of the organisms in image B. And then there is an extra credit question. Organisms that are shown here, they were in a phylum, they are in a phylum, called Archaeozoa. They were considered to be ancient because they lacked a certain type of organelle. And it was thought that they evolved before that particular organelle was engulfed by the eukaryotic cell. More recently, researchers think that organelle was in there and it was lost. But what was the organelle? Okay, we need to look at those again, huh?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, question 1. The organisms shown here belong to what phylum? This was the first phylum. It was the first group of organisms that we had to look at where you were expected to be able to identify organisms by sight. There were 5 different genera. There's only 2 shown there. And the phylum name is the same as the common name for the group. They used to be called blue-green algae. They're not. That is, they're not algae. So if you're looking in the lab manual, you would begin with where the first images show up. Because this is the first group where you had to be able to identify these guys by sight. What's the phylum? Question 2, these organisms are in a different domain. That's a big hint. The other ones were in the other domain we look at. These are in the domain Eukarya and the kingdom one. And we only look at 2 domains. So I want phylum name on question 1, kingdom name on question 2. Question 3, phylum again. These organisms belong to what phylum? In this particular category of organisms, all the phylum names end the same, and they are determined by the type of sexual spore produced. So if you could recognize those sexual spores, then you would be able to know what the phylum is. Question 4. These are both the same organism type, image A, sexual spores, image B, asexual spores. What is the genus represented here? And on the prepared slides that are in the box, both of these images are on the same slide, they're just different regions of the slide. That was true for the other one as well. Question 5, genus name for the fungus type that is producing sexual basidiospores. So we have 2 images. they're not the same kind of spores in each image. So what is the genus name for the image that shows sexual basilospores? And again, these are fleshy fungi, both of the examples here. There are no asexual spores associated with them. Question 6. These organisms all belong to a different kingdom. So think 5-kingdom system. We're using a Whittaker 5-kingdom system. We threw one out. We threw out Kingdom Monera because it isn't valid anymore. And so then looking at the 4 kingdoms that are left, one of them is the first group. Here's another group. Tonight we looked at the third group, and we never did look at the 4th one because they're plants and leaves. Question 7. What is the phylum name of the organisms in figure A? This happens to be a very large phylum, and we have numerous representative examples. And Diana, we'll go back and start from the beginning. Question 8. Which of these organisms belongs to the genus Spirogyra? So the correct answer to number 8 is A, B, or C, the letter. Question 9. These organisms have skeletons or cell walls. Skeletons on the left, cell walls on the right. What are they made of? And question 10, what is the phylum name of the organism shown in figure B? And what I said about organisms in this group is that it would be nice if all the phyla ended in zoa. They don't all, but the one you get to name does. And then our extra credit question. These organisms were formerly considered ancient because they lacked what organelles? They apparently had them and then lost them at some point. They don't have them anymore. We have to go through these again because we started lab already. So, question number 1: organisms shown here belong to the what phylum? Again, the phylum name is the name for the group. And this phylum is in a domain that's different from the domain of everything else we're looking at. Question 2. These organisms are in the domain Eukarya, and they're in a kingdom what? Again, think Whittaker 5-kingdom system. One kingdom gets thrown out, Monera, doesn't exist. Plantae, we don't ever look at, so that leaves 3 kingdoms. We talked about one tonight, and there's 2 on this quiz. That's one of them. Question 3. These organisms belong to what phylum? The type of sexual spore tells you the phylum name. Question 4. What is the genus of the organism type shown here? A are sexual spores, B are asexual spores. What's the genus? Question 5. The type of fungus, again the genus name, for the fungus that is producing sexual basidiospores. There's a rather large hint on this slide, too, if you're paying attention. Now for this question. Question 6. These organisms belong to what kingdom? The kingdom that we were talking about last time. Last lab. This was the kingdom proposed by Ernst Haeckel in 1866 or something like that. It took a long time for this kingdom to come into being. Question 7. What is the phylum name for the organisms in figure A? This is a big phylum. There are multiple examples. So we have one single cell, a whole bunch of filamentous forms, and desmids. Question 8. Which of these organisms belongs to the genus Spirogyra? The correct answer here is a letter. Is it A, B, or C? Number 9. The skeletons on the left, walls on the right, contain what material? What are they made of? And 10, what is the phylum name of the organisms in figure B? And our extra credit, what organelle do these things not have? So they were thought to be ancient. They're in the phylum Archaeozoa. They got that name because they were thought to be ancient. Because they don't have these organelles, now people think they had them and lost them. Okay, do we need to see any particular one again?
Yes.
Well, okay, here's 10, because it's close. That's 10. Phylum name, figure B. And here's 5. The genus name for the organisms producing basidiospores. Any others?
6.
7?
6 and 7, yeah.
Okay, so here's 6. What's the kingdom? All of those organisms are in the same kingdom. Hint, single-celled, animal-like, and plant-like organisms. Kingdom. And then 7, the phylum name for the organisms in A. This is a big phylum. We had lots of representatives. Actually, there's lots of representatives in B too. We didn't talk about it.
Oh.
Yeah. 10 again. Phylum name for B.
Oh, 7 one more time.
What phylum name? Phylum name for A. So generally speaking on these organisms, you need to know the domain. We only look at two. One domain is bacteria, the other is eukarya. We don't look at archaea. And within those domains, the first domain, we only have one phylum that you have to look at. Hint there. And in the second domain, the eukarya, we have how many phylums? 3. 2 of them are on this quiz. The last one we talked about tonight.
Can you go back to 6, please?
Those are kingdoms. Where am I going? 6. Oops, stop. 6. So you need to get a handle on the taxonomy. One thing that is useful is to take the images from the website and make 3x5 cards out of them. You can put about 6 on a page, get them printed, cut them into segments, and then on the back side where you can't see it, put the information you have to know about that. You begin looking at them, they're just pretty pictures. And then you start learning whatever categories come first. Domains, easy, because we only have 2. Then kingdoms, and then phyla. And then we usually skip a bunch of taxonomic ranks. You have to know the genus. Yes?
Number 5.
Wait, 5? Yeah, but, oh. Okay, we'll do 4 and then we'll do 5. Sorry, he had his hand up first. There's 4. Genus. There's images, they're in the web page, they're in the lab manual. They're on the web page too, but there's pictures in the lab manual. And here's 5. What's the genus of the organisms producing basidiospores? The other thing I've had students do is put these images on their computer as a screensaver and have them just change, not too fast, but just change, I don't know, 30 seconds, and the next one comes up. And the individual that did this said it was just entertaining, they were pretty pictures, and then they began to sort into kingdoms, and then into phyla. There's a couple of classes with the parasites we're going to get tonight, but then we skip family, order, and jump to genus. Are we finished? No? Which?
Let's go through the whole thing one more time.
Goodness sakes. 9. Skeletons or walls made of what? This was supposed to be quick. What was yours?
The whole thing.
Oh, come on. You've been through it 3 times.
It's so fast. Okay, 7.
7. Okay. If you would kindly tackle this one. So, remember that for the laboratory exam, you're going to be looking through microscopes at these images. My job is to find views that look as much like the images on the website as I can find. And I have a box that I took pictures of the slides in that box, and those pictures are on the website. That helps. Oh, there they are. Cool.
What was that all written? Oh, I thought you were
You can make flashcards, your very own flashcards. You just put the information on the back. You get them printed at Costco.
I actually did.
Oh shit.
It says it's an introduction to multicellular parasites and a bunch of other microscopic invertebrates. And the reason for this is because if you were studying microbiology and you were doing an environmental survey, you would probably find some of these microscopic things that are not parasites. So I thought, well, I'll stick them in. So, And then I mentioned already that a lot of times the multicellular parasites aren't microscopic at all. So the reason that they're included in microbiology textbooks is because they're immature stages. Eggs and larvae are microscopic, and also because some of them are parasites. And then microbiologists are involved in looking at the diseases that these guys might transmit. So these parasites can carry viruses, bacteria, protozoa, and sometimes we saw mosquitoes can transmit dirofilaria. So dirofilaria is a multicellular parasite itself that's picked up and transmitted by mosquitoes. So not all of these things that you're going to see are parasites. And in fact, if you look at microscopic invertebrates, very few of them are parasites. So we just have a bunch of things that are in here that are kind of interesting. There you can see some images. You can find lots and lots of images online. Just put names in there and Google search. There's a lot of different things. So again, you don't need to know all of these phyla. For the parasites, you need to be able to recognize and identify them. Again, you need to know the genus names. Most of these have species names, as I mentioned in lecture. Species names are extra credit on the laboratory exam. Again, you will be given a name sheet. The name sheet has 3 columns of names. It includes domain names, phylum or kingdoms, phylums, and a couple of classes, a whole bunch of genera. And to make 3 full columns, there's some extra ones thrown in for fun. But what that means is you don't have to worry about spelling. You just need to know your taxonomy. Because they're in alphabetical order, they're not in taxonomic order. And so you need to be able to describe the taxonomy. For this section, we're talking about Animalia. So our domain is Eukarya, the kingdom is Animalia. The phyla, we have Platyhelminthes and Achelminthes, and then the ectoparasites are all Arthropoda. There are 2 classes. The classes are in the Platyhelminthes group because tapeworms and flukes are in different classes. We had 1 class with the protozoa because they gave you the class Sporozoea, with sporozoans. Okay, so here we are. This is our first phylum that you don't have to know. So it's like, oh, those are cool. This is the phylum Cnidaria, or it used to be called Selenorata. So these are selenerates. This is kind of an interesting image because what you see here are some little microscopic animals called hydra. The hydra here, this thing has these tentacles that have stinging cells on them. So they're related to sea anemones and jellyfish, that kind of thing. But this guy and all of these are just kind of tan, gray looking. This one is green. Why do you suppose it's green? It's an animal. Animals are chemoheterotrophs. Remember what I talked about? Certain types of algae can take up residence inside animals. So that particular hydra that you see on the left there has living with it symbiotic algae. So probably Zoochlorellae, the same kind of thing that makes our sea anemones off the California coast green, the giant green sea anemones. They're only green because they have algae living with them. So now we've moved to the phylum Platyhelminthes, the flatworms. In this phylum, there are 3 classes. In the first class, Turbularia, we don't look at. A lot of biology classes play with these guys. The genus is Dugesia, but that's not what they call them. They call them planarians. Anyway, they're kind of fun to play with. They look like they have little faces, but they have crossed eyes, which aren't eyes, but that's what it looks like. And they have these things sticking out to the side that look like ears. They're not ears, but anyway, in biology classes, people like to play with these things and sometimes cut them up and see if they can regenerate parts. Now, we've moved to the phylum that, or the class that you do need to know. So we're still in the domain Eukarya, kingdom Animalia, phylum Platyhelminthes, flatworms, and this is the class Trematoda. The trematodes are the flukes. This is Fasciola hepatica. That's the adult liver fluke. Somewhere we have a jar with adult liver flukes in it and some plastic mounts so you can see adult flukes. Adult flukes are about an inch long and they look like leaves. What you guys get to look at are the larval forms. So these guys, again, they're monoecious. That adult is mostly reproductive system. In our slide boxes, we have two stages. We have the retia. This is Fasciola hepatica retia. The retia contains cercariae. The individual cercariae look like this. So they have the body part, and they have a tail. This tail folds around behind. And this tail down here is attached to some other fruit body. Anyway, so that's Fasciola hepatica. Their cercariae look a little bit like tadpoles. Still in the domain Eukarya, kingdom Animalia, phylum Platyhelminthes, class Trematoda, the blood flukes. So these are schistosome flukes. Again, male and female are separate sexes. These are dioecious. And the male is holding the female in a kind of a groove so that just the front and back end of the female is sticking out there. The males are considerably larger. So this is showing a sporocyst with multiple cercaria. Actually, if you look at this image, you'd say, wait, isn't that the same as the retia? Because we don't actually have slides that are labeled sporocyst slide. So if you see a retia, it's actually fasciola, but I'm more interested that you know the cercariae. These are the cercaria of schistosome flukes. Notice the forked tail. These are the ones that burrow through the skin. So what you're seeing here, this fluke body with its tail and the fork, this fluke body with its tail, and this fluke body goes with that tail. So it came off. Then we move to the next class, which is class Cestoda. The Cestoda are tapeworms. There are lots of different types of tapeworms. The only one we look at is tanium. So this is showing tapeworm proglottids on the left and in the middle, and then tapeworm cysts in muscle tissue on the right. This is showing a rabbit with tapeworm cysts in its body cavity to give you an idea how big these can form. So this rabbit would have accidentally ingested tapeworm eggs, and then the tapeworm eggs moved into the tissue, in this case into the abdominal cavity, and formed these cysts, which are just these, they look like bubbles, but they're kind of a tapeworm turned inside out. The scolex is kind of inside the bubble, and then if that were eaten, that would then invert itself and attach to the intestinal wall of whatever ate that rabbit and make a new tapeworm. This is showing tapeworm in a stomach and a tapeworm scolex. Again, the scolex has a set of hooks and a set of suckers. There's actually 4 of these, and they're just to hold on to the intestinal wall. That scolex gets a good grip on the intestinal wall and just hangs there, and then as the worm matures downstream, so to speak, it breaks into these segments called proglottids and they fall off. So again, hooks and suckers. That's not a head. They don't really have a head. As I said, there's no mouth, there's no eyes, no ears, no nose. Now we've moved domain Eukarya, kingdom Animalia, phylum Ashhelminthes. However, this phylum is also sometimes called Nemahelminthes or just Nematoda. Roundworms are sometimes just called nematodes. And you need to recognize 4 different genera, but what we are looking at are the larval stages. And really to identify roundworm larvae, you have to spend a lot of time and study internal structures, which we don't have time to do in here. So instead what we're doing is looking at the background. We think about life cycles and then look to see how are these larval worms presented. So here we see larval worms coiled up in a spiral, if you will, in muscle tissue. This is Trichinella spiralis. You see that little coiled up worm larvae in muscle tissue, that tells you that's Trichinella. Why you do not want to eat raw or poorly cooked pork or any other kind of meat. These guys can be in other kinds of animals. This is Necator or Ancylostoma, and you could use either genus name for this. This is a hookworm larvae. Our slides don't tell you what the genus is, it just says hookworm larvae. The hookworm larvae would be in soil, and then they would be looking for a host and they burrow through the skin. So these are free larvae. In this case, there's nothing behind it, just a worm.
So you said the slide doesn't have a genus?
No, it just says hookworm larvae. But we have two
But-
genera, and so if you see hookworm larvae, you can call them either Necator or Ancylostoma. Necator's easy to spell, but it doesn't matter. This is Onchocerca volvulus. These are larvae inside the adult worm. So what we're looking at is a cross section through an adult worm. And then again, these little larvae in here are all coiled up. This is an interesting slide. If you look at the actual slides that we have, some of them have larvae that have left the adult worm. So these worms produce live larvae that then go off into the tissue. And so in some cases, you can see the larvae outside the worm. They eventually get into the bloodstream, and they are also transmitted to the next host by a vector, a fly. This is Dirofilaria ennetus, canine heartworm. Notice in this case, we're looking at a worm in blood. We know that it's blood because you can see blood cells behind the worm. So this is a very distinctive environment. It's blood smear, and that's where you would find this type of parasite in the bloodstream. Again, it's going to be picked up by a mosquito, transmitted to the next host. This is a leech. So this is domain Eukarya, kingdom Animalia, phylum Annelidae. You do not have to know this phylum. And the reason is because although leeches are parasites, apparently they're not of any particular interest to microbiologists because they're not vectors. They don't transmit diseases, as far as I know. Although they feed on blood, that one is a pet. So, have any of you working in a clinical setting encountered leeches? They're actually used for removing blood. If there's a hematoma, there's blood under the skin, put those leeches on there and they'll take it away. They have anticoagulant in their saliva so they can get the blood to move quite readily. And apparently, some hospitals keep leeches. I don't know if they're that big. I don't know. And what do they eat when they're not feeding on patients? I don't know that either. This is showing microscopic annelids. If you've looked at a pond sample, you might see something like this. Annelids can vary considerably in size. You're probably all familiar with earthworms. Those are annelids. There are polychaete marine worms that are several feet long. So these guys, a lot of variation. This last phylum is the phylum Arthropoda or Arthropoda. Arth means joint and pod means foot. So these are joint-footed animals. The reason they're called that is because their skeleton is external. So their support system's on the outside rather than like ours on the inside. Their muscles are attached inside, and their joints are like suits of armor joints. So they have a solid skeleton. A lot of these are significant because they're vectors. So vectors, actually if you read, a lot of references will tell you vectors transmit disease. I would argue no, they don't. Vectors transmit organisms that could cause disease. Vectors transmit viruses, technically not organisms. They transmit bacteria, those are organisms. They transmit protozoa, they transmit other multicellular parasites. Just because something is transmitted to you doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get that disease. You might not, it depends on your immune system. So you need to know, this is Dermacentor andersoni, the wood tick. This is a vector for rickettsial diseases. Rickettsia causes Rocky Mountain spotted fever. So we have two ticks that you need to look at. This particular tick, if you look at the back of the abdomen, it has these dark patches along here so that it almost looks like it's glowed. This spot is a genital pore, and the hind limbs, the back pair of legs, are fairly well back on the abdomen of this organism. Ticks are like spiders, they have 8 legs. And I had a student one time explain to me how she remembered Dermacentor andersoni. She made up stories about these names. So in this case, Derma sent her and her son a tick. We don't know more. This is Ixodes damonii. This is the eastern deer tick, and this is the vector for Borrelia burgdorferi, the bacteria that causes Lyme disease. On the west coast, we have Ixodes pacifica. The reason that in our box we have Ixodes damonii is because we buy these slides from a company called Carolina Biological. Guess where they're located? Carolina. Anyway, look at the back of the abdomen. So what you'll notice is you don't have the dark marks back here. The genital pore is quite a bit further back. The legs are quite a bit further forward, and there's an X on that tick. So there's an X in the name, and there's an X on the tick. You have to look for it. Ixodes damonii. The next one is Sarcoptes scabiei. This is an itch mite, and it's standing on its head. So these things are really small. To see them, if you're looking with your 10x lens, the most difficult aspect, they're small, but they're also almost transparent. So what you have to do is turn the light rheostat all the way up and close the diaphragm. This is the head. They have 2 limbs here, 2 limbs here, so 4 going this way, and then 2 here and 2. So again, they're like spiders, they have 8 legs. Most of these things only have 8 legs when they're adults. When they're young, they have 6. So those first 3 were related to spiders. They have 8 legs. Now we've gone to insects. This is Pediculus humanus capitis, which Sasha says is her favorite technical name. I'm not sure why. I don't think she particularly likes that parasite. This is a head louse. So Pediculus humanus capitis is the head louse. Pediculus humanus corporis is the body louse. Body louse is recognized as a vector for Rickettsia provozekii, which causes epidemic typhus, and I think I sent you guys, supposedly more people died during World War I of epidemic typhus than died of gunshot wounds. So this is a significant vector. For some reason, Pediculus humanus capitis is not supposed to be a vector, but it does show up in elementary age children locally, and you'll get a note from the teachers at the school, and they say, your child has head lice. Well, how do they know? And how does that relate to being nitpicky? If you look at this hair, you can see these tiny little white flecks. Those are louse eggs. And louse eggs are called nits. Here you can see them illustrated. So here's the egg, here's the louse. They attach them to the hair, typically along the back of the neck, behind the ears, on very fine hairs. You find these little white things. These are hard to see. This is an electron photomicrograph of that louse. But if a person is nitpicking, what it means is they're picking off nits. If you're a chimpanzee, you'd probably pick it off and eat it, but people don't usually do that. You can get them off with a comb, which is very irritating to the small child. They don't like that. You can get them off with shampoo, which you have to do because you gotta get rid of those things. This next one is Xenopsula chiopus. This is the rodent flea or rat flea, and it's the vector for Yersinia pestis, causative agent of bubonic plague. Notice how most of the ones we looked at, they were kind of flat on their belly, whereas fleas are on their side, and that's because fleas are flat, or laterally flat. They have really good hind legs for jumping. They have a really big leg back here, kind of like a grasshopper, and they can jump quite readily from the ground or from the carpet up onto a dog's belly or a cat's belly. And then our last example, Culex pipiens. This is a mosquito. Mosquitoes are vectors for a wide variety of disease-causing agents. This particular one can transmit encephalitis viruses. Culex is one of those mosquitoes that doesn't go very far from home, so they're hatching out typically in people's yards in some leftover water spot. Anyway, so those are our parasites. Then we have the phylum Gastrotricha. They're cute. You don't have to know them. They kind of look like little miniature sea otters. Well, their faces do, but they don't have any legs. And that face isn't really what you think anyway. Doesn't have any of the structures you think it should have. And then there's rotifers. I think some of you saw rotifers when we were looking with the microscopes at the water samples at the beginning. These come in a wide variety of shapes and sizes. If they were really big, you would not want to meet them coming down a dark alley, because they're pretty horrific looking. But those guys are often monitored by people that are working at wastewater treatment facilities, because they monitor the quality of their water tanks by how well the rotifers are doing. They want them to do well. And then these are tardigrades. Again, a phylum you don't have to know. Tardigrades are, apparently they're very popular with people that do electron photomicrographs, because you find these in all different positions and different colors. When they look opaque like this, they're dead. That's a scanning electron photomicrograph. This is what they look like alive. They're transparent. But they do have little cute claws. That's why they're called bears. They just have too many legs. They're also called moss animals. You can find them in moss. Yeah.
I was watching a video on YouTube, and it said like it was about an organism that can survive any type of condition.
These guys. So these guys live in moss. Now, if you're familiar with California summers, it is hot and dry, and the moss dries up, and so do the tardigrades. And apparently, they can become like little crispy critters. You know those little things that you can buy and you put them in water and they puff up? That's what these do. So they can become completely desiccated and not die. And they're just hanging around waiting for it to start to rain again. And it rains, and they take on water, and they reactivate and become tardigrades. Crazy.
They can live in like outer space, something through, or theoretically.
Hard telling, because when they're crispy, I think they're pretty resistant to a lot of, ultraviolet light, for sure. Heat, it's pretty amazing. There's some crazy animals on this planet, crazier than us. Okay, so you can continue to work on your morphological unknowns. You can continue to work on your soil enrichment. You can look at prepared slides. When I get the movie started, just don't talk, okay? You can watch the movie and just kind of go by in the background.
That's good. The pictures so we can draw her in the movie. Let's do that with the quickness.